question, and before I have my first sip, who was the first woman in America to receive a military pension for her service in combat? I'm trying to battle my doggo here, so forgive me. Most people have no idea. We know names like George Washington and Paul Revere and Betsy Ross. But today's story is about someone whose name deserves to be remembered right alongside of them. Her name, Margaret Corbin. She wasn't famous. She wasn't looking to be a hero that day. She simply refused to leave her post. And because of that one decision, history remembers her. So let's grab a cup of coffee and let me introduce you to one of America's original heroes. That first sip is the best. Hey friends, welcome back to Coffee with Soldier Mom, Forged in America edition. I'm Jody, better known as Soldier Mom. And if you're new around here, welcome. Around here, we believe character matters, history matters, and hope. And raising good humans is still one of the most important jobs on the planet. So grab your cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's have a conversation. You know, one of my favorite things about history is discovering people's names who rarely make it into our history books. Not because they weren't important, but because history has a funny way of shining a spotlight on just a few people, while leaving others standing quietly in the background, and sometimes doing a lot of the work. That's why I wanted this series to be called Forged in America, because our nation wasn't built by a handful of famous names. It was built by ordinary people like you and me who made extraordinary choices. Margaret Corbin is one of those people. Margaret Cochran was born in 1751. Life wasn't easy. In fact, when she was just a little girl, maybe around 5, her father was killed during a Native American raid, and her mother was taken captive. She was raised by relatives from that point forward, and hardship wasn't something she learned about later in life. It had always been part of her story from the very beginning. Years later, at the ripe old age of 22, she married John Corbin. And when the Revolutionary War began, John joined the Continental Army. Makes sense? Like many military wives of the time, Margaret didn't stay home. She followed the army, but not as a soldier, but what was called a camp follower. These women would cook meals and wash uniforms, care for the sick. They would even bring clean water and often found themselves dangerously close to the front lines. History sometimes overlooks them, but their services were important because armies don't function without support. And as a military mom and a veteran, I can't help but think about the families who have always served alongside those of us in uniform. Service has never been an individual effort. It's always been a family commitment. But I digress. Let's get back to the Revolutionary War. The Battle of Fort Washington, November 16, 1776, Fort Washington, New York. British forces launched a massive attack. John Corbin was serving as an artilleryman. Margaret stayed beside him. And some say she dressed like a man and others say that she didn't. But that's a little fun fact we can look up later. She was helping load the cannon, literally. Imagine the noise and the smoke filling the air and cannons firing, people shouting, chaos surrounds them. And then everything changed. John was struck and killed. Most people, understandably, would have run, but Margaret didn't. She stepped forward. She took her husband's place and she continued loading and firing the cannon against the British advance. Again and again, she did this. The soldiers around her said she handled that gun with skill and steady aim. Until she was hit herself by grapeshot. And if you've never heard that term, grapeshot was a cannon loaded not with one big cannonball, but with a whole cluster of small iron balls. Somebody thought it looked like a bunch of grapes, which is where the name came from. When it fired, it sprayed like a giant shotgun, which is why her wounds were everywhere all at once. Her jaw, her chest, her left arm, which was so badly wounded that she never gained or regained full use of it the rest of her life. And here's the detail that gets me the most. Grapeshot was a close-range weapon. That tells you just how near the British they had gotten, and she still was firing. Anyway, she was captured when the fort fell. I cannot talk today, but here we go. And later released. Severely wounded, permanently disabled, but her courage was already part of American history. The soldiers even gave her a nickname, Captain Molly. Think about that for a minute. Nobody ordered her to stay. She wasn't chasing fame. She was not thinking, ooh, I bet the history books will remember this. She saw something that needed to be done and she did it. That's courage. And listen, courage is not the absence of fear. I guarantee she was scared. Of course she was scared. She just saw her husband killed. Courage is deciding that something else matters more than the fear. So why is her story so important today? Because it's easy to hear stories like this and think, I could never do anything like that. Well, maybe, maybe not. But here's the thing though. Most of us are never going to stand beside a cannon in battle. Thank goodness. But every single one of us is going to face moments that ask us to choose courage. Standing up for a kid who's being bullied, telling the truth when a lie would be so much easier. What about helping a neighbor or admitting a mistake? Admitting a mistake, that's hard. Doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Those are today's battlefields. And character is still forged there, my friends. Every single. And one of the things I've learned through my military service, if I could be so bold, is that courage is rarely loud. It's usually quietly performed. You see it in young service members leaving home for the first time. It's the military spouse holding it together during their partner's deployment. It's the teacher who refuses to give up on a struggling student, and I feel that one. It's the child walking into a new classroom after moving across the country and not knowing anyone. Those moments don't make the evening news, but they matter. Margaret Corbin reminds us that history isn't only shaped by famous leaders. It's shaped by ordinary people like us, choosing courage when it counts. And I gotta bring in one more thing, a Star Wars moment. You knew I couldn't resist. One of the reasons I've always loved Princess Leia is that she understood exactly this. She wasn't sitting around waiting to be rescued. She stepped into leadership when it was needed. She stayed calm under fire and gave people hope. Margaret Corbin did the same thing 200 years earlier. Different battlefield, same character. Courage doesn't belong to one generation or one galaxy. It belongs to anybody willing to answer the call. So when we tell children stories like Margaret Corbin's, we're doing more than just teaching history. We're introducing them to role models. We're showing them that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes uniforms, yeah, but sometimes they wear aprons or backpacks. And sometimes they look like the person sitting right next to them in class. History gives us the examples, but character gives us the direction. So tonight's conversation around the kitchen table, ask your family, who is the bravest person you know and what makes them so courageous? And then just listen. I mean, really listen. Their answer just might surprise you. Oh, and don't forget to share yours because your kids need to know you have heroes too. And my challenge for you this week is to learn about one American hero you've never heard of before. It could be a soldier, it could be a teacher, a firefighter, a nurse, a scientist, or your neighbor. Then tell someone else their story because heroes, they're remembered when somebody is willing to tell their story, just like we did today. So remember my question at the beginning? Here's the answer. On July 6th, 1779, the Continental Congress voted to grant Margaret Corbin a lifetime military pension for her wounds in combat. She was the first woman in American history to receive one. A young widow from Pennsylvania frontier, orphaned as a child, wounded at her post, recognized by the founding generation itself.
They chose character.
Pretty cool. She never expected to become part of history. She simply answered the moment in front of her. And that's the thing about character. You don't build it when everybody's watching. You build it in the choices nobody expects. And when the moment comes, character shows up before confidence ever does. That's why I believe history matters. Not because of the dates, because trust me, nobody's here for the dates, but because it introduces us to people who remind us who we can become, or quite frankly, where we've come from. Margaret Corbin's story tells us that ordinary people can leave ordinary or extraordinary legacies. So maybe that's the invitation for all of us, not to become famous, but to become faithful to our values, to our families, to doing what's right when it matters most. And here's a closing thought. Heroes aren't remembered because they sought recognition. They're remembered because they chose character. And every generation gets the opportunity to do the same. All right, folks, thank you for joining me for another edition of Forged in America. Until next time, love your family well, lead with character, hold on to hope, and wherever life takes you, leave people better than you found them. And remember, I'm always saving you a seat right here at Coffee with Soldier Mom. See you next time.